All right, this week we're going to be covering Chapter 11, the urinary system. All right, and we're going to start off with an overview of the urinary system. Its primary goal is going to be the elimination of waste and excess substances from the body. And there's going to be a whole variety of things. A lot of those metabolic wastes include carbon dioxide, water, heat, salts, nitrogen-containing waste like ammonium, urea, uric acid, creatine. And there are several organs that eliminate waste and excess essential ions. So it's not just the urinary system, but for example, the lungs help get rid of heat, water, carbon dioxide. The skin helps us eliminate excess heat, water, bicarbonate ions, salts, urea, uric acid. The organs of the GI tract help us eliminate solid wastes and a few metabolic wastes. The kidneys are going to be responsible for forming urine, which is a mix of water and solutes, water, bicarbonate ion, inorganic salts, hydrogen ions, urea, uric acid, and creatine. So there are a lot of different systems that eliminate various types of waste. Another very important goal of the urinary system is not only to eliminate metabolic wastes, but also to help maintain the water-salt balance of the blood. This is going to be a principal function of the kidneys. Salts, like sodium chloride, have the ability to influence the rate and direction of osmosis. Therefore, the more salts there are in the blood, the greater the blood volume and the greater the blood pressure. So by regulating the concentration of sodium and potassium in the blood, the kidneys can regulate the blood pressure. The kidneys also maintain the appropriate levels of the other ions, like those bicarbonate ions and calcium ions. The urinary system is also responsible for maintaining the acid-base balance of blood. So a healthy blood pH is around 7.4. And the kidneys are going to be responsible for monitoring and helping controlling that pH by excreting additional hydrogen ions and reabsorbing hydrogen carbonate ions as needed. And so the urine usually has a pH of around 6 or lower because the diet contains so many acidic foods. So the urinary system, in addition to maintaining blood pressure and maintaining water-salt balance, maintaining pH, the urinary system is also responsible for secreting certain hormones. The kidneys, for example, release renin, which is an enzyme that leads to aldosterone secretion. Aldosterone is a hormone that is produced by the adrenal glands, which sit right on top of the kidneys. This is going to be responsible for regulating the water-salt balance of the blood. And the kidneys also release erythropoietin, which is a hormone that stimulates the production of red blood cells, as we talked about earlier in our section on blood. So there are a few other functions of the kidneys. The kidneys also reabsorb filtered nutrients and participate in the synthesis of vitamin D. Vitamin D is a hormone that produces the calcium ion absorption, that promotes calcium ion absorption in our digestive tract. Just to give you a general overview of some of the organs in the urinary system, the urinary system consists of the kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra. The kidneys are located one on each side of the vertebral column, partially protected by the rib cage. Now, due to the liver, the right kidney is positioned slightly lower than the left kidney. These are going to be bean-shaped and reddish to brownish in color, covered by a renal capsule. Now, the concave side of the kidney is where the renal artery enters and a renal vein and ureter exit. And the renal artery is going to be responsible for transporting blood to the kidneys. The renal vein carries the filtered blood away from the kidneys. Now the ureters, we of course have two ureters, one for each kidney. They're going to be responsible for conducting the urine from the kidneys to the bladder. Now the wall of the ureters has three layers: an inner mucosa, a smooth muscle layer, and then an outer fibrous coat of connective tissue. We use peristaltic contractions in the ureter to push the urine into the bladder, so even when you're lying down. So we don't rely solely on gravity to force urine from the kidneys down into the bladder, but we use those peristaltic contractions. That's what the smooth muscle is used for on those ureters. Lastly, we have the urinary, or I'm sorry, not lastly, but we do have the urinary bladder. The urinary bladder is going to be responsible for storing the urine. It has 3 openings, 2 for the ureters to empty into it and 1 for the urethra to drain from it. The folds in the mucosa are called rugae. They disappear as the bladder enlarges. So it's kind of like a deflated balloon, and then as it inflates, those wrinkles, rugae, are going to disappear. A layer of transitional epithelium enables the bladder to stretch, and then small folds of the bladder mucosa act as a valve to prevent the backward flow of urine into the ureters. There are 2 sphincters where the urethra exits the bladder. There's an internal sphincter, which is composed of smooth muscle and is involuntarily controlled. You have no control over your internal sphincter. However, the external sphincter is composed of skeletal muscle that can be voluntarily controlled. The last component of the urinary system is going to be the urethra. The urethra extends from the urinary bladder to an external opening. The short length of the female urethra makes women much more susceptible to urinary tract infections. In males, as the urethra leaves the male urinary bladder, it is encircled by a prostate gland. The prostate sometimes enlarges later in life, restricting the flow of the urine to the urethra. In females, the reproductive and urinary systems are not connected. In males, however, the urethra carries urine during urination and sperm during ejaculation. So here's another overview of the urinary system. Here we have our 2 kidneys, the ureters that drain from the kidneys into the bladder, and then from the bladder, or going out from the bladder, we have the urethra, which passes that urine to the outside. Urination. Urination, or micturition, is the process by which the urinary bladder is emptied. This includes both that involuntary and voluntary components. Like we said, that internal urethral sphincter is made of smooth muscle, which makes it involuntary. The external urethral sphincter is composed of skeletal muscle, which makes it voluntary. Now, the kidneys are going to be producing urine 24/7. Urine is constantly trickling down into the bladder. In babies, the neural connection between the sphincter, the external sphincter, is not complete or mature, so they have no control of the relaxing relaxing the muscle, and so urine is continuously made and sent to the bladder, and eventually the bladder stretches enough to send a signal via sensory neurons to the spinal cord and the brain, which begins the desire to urinate. Once it is time to urinate, the brain permits voluntary relaxation of the external urethral sphincter because it's skeletal muscle, and the urine is going to be expelled. So here is that neural connection. We have the urinary bladder. Once it receives the signal, the stretch receptors receive the signal that, hey, it's full. That signal gets sent to the spinal cord. The spinal cord sends that message to the brain and says, hey, we need to go to the bathroom. And the brain says, okay, and releases the external sphincter, which allows the urine to flow. All right, you should be able to list and briefly describe the functions of the organs of the urinary system and summarize the process of the kidneys, the processes that the kidneys perform to maintain homeostasis. And then you should be able to predict what could occur to overall homeostasis if the kidneys could not excrete their metabolic waste products from the body. What would potentially happen?